Hello and welcome to Virtual Investor Conferences. On behalf of OTC Markets, we're very pleased you joined us for the 23rd Life Sciences Investor Forum. Our first presentation today is from Amplia Therapeutics. Please note you may submit questions for the presenter in the box to the left of the slides, and you can also view a company's availability for one-on-one meetings by clicking Book a Meeting in the top toolbar. At this point, I'm very pleased to welcome Chris Burns. He's the Chief Executive Officer and Managing Director of Amplia Therapeutics, which trades on the OTC markets under the symbol INNMF and on the ASX under the symbol ATX. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you very much, and thank you to everybody who's dialing in today to listen to this presentation. As was introduced there, I'm the CEO and Managing Director of Amplia Therapeutics. We're a company based in Australia, listed on the Australian Stock Exchange and the OTC. I'm excited today to present our latest data and plans for the future. I'm going to just quickly move through the disclaimer. And starting at a high level, an executive summary, our lead asset is a drug called narmefotinib. It's an inhibitor of a protein called FAK. We believe it's the best-in-class FAK inhibitor in development. We have promising data from a clinical trial that we're currently running in pancreatic cancer called the ACCENT trial, and I will touch on some of that preliminary data to date. And then we've just opened up a new trial, also in pancreatic cancer, slightly different scheme, and I'll talk about that today. That trial is running in Australia and the US. And lastly, I wanted to recognise the fact that the company has both Fast Track designation and Orphan Drug designation from the US FDA. A little bit about the company here, a snapshot from yesterday. We've had, this is the share price over the last 12 months. You can see we've had a good run up here in sort of June, July. That was on the back of some recent data from the ACCENT study that I'll speak to in due course. And then some additional positive data, and then we did a fundraise in August, which was at a slight discount to the share price. So the share price has come back a little bit. Like a lot of Australian companies, have a lot of shares on issue, and market cap currently in Australian dollars of a little under 100 million. So our drug is being trialled in metastatic pancreatic cancer. This is a disease many of you will be familiar with, and I don't give a presentation without coming across people who've been either directly affected by it through loved ones or know somebody who has been affected by pancreatic cancer. And while we consider it a rare disease, there's a little over 65,000 pancreatic cancer diagnoses each year in the US. It is still a disease where we see increasing prevalence, and as I say, we do. Everybody knows somebody who's been affected by pancreatic cancer. In terms of metastatic pancreatic cancer, unfortunately, the majority of patients who are diagnosed with metastatic pancreatic cancer have metastatic disease. This is disease that's also not only in the pancreas, but actually disseminated in the body, often in the liver, lung, could be the bone marrow. So disease that's spread elsewhere to other organs. Unfortunately, it's a highly aggressive cancer, and indeed the 5-year survival for people with metastatic pancreatic cancer is less than 3%. So highly aggressive. The majority of patients who are diagnosed with pancreatic cancer have metastatic disease. Unfortunately, currently there are limited treatment options. The two main treatment options are chemotherapy, one a combination of two drugs called gemcitabine and Abraxane, which is shown here, and the second a combination of 4 drugs called FOLFIRINOX. If we look across analyses of patients who are newly diagnosed and the kind of drugs they are treated with, we see that about half are treated with this combination of gemcitabine and Abraxane, about a quarter are treated with FOLFIRINOX, and then variations of FOLFIRINOX and variations of or just gemcitabine alone. So in total, over 75% of patients by this assessment are treated with either gemcitabine, Abraxane, and FOLFIRINOX. And if we look at those particular treatments, they do have a beneficial effect, but it's not significant, it's not substantial. So the median progression-free survival for gemcitabine and Abraxane is about 5.5 months, and median overall survival is about 8.5 months. FOLFIRINOX, in contrast, has a slightly improved median progression-free survival and median overall survival, but still the numbers are still quite small, 6.4 and 11.1 months. Worth noting that gemcitabine and Abraxane often reserved for older patients. The tolerability of that drug combination is okay, at least in the shorter term. Longer term, one does develop some toxicity. FOLFIRINOX is really quite an aggressive treatment from the outset, and so that's why I'm showing this sort of unhappy face. But I guess the trade-off is that you do get a slightly increased median overall survival. So if we move forward to the next slide, if we think about the pancreatic cancer market, as I said, there's increasing prevalence. We have, as I said, the 67,000 diagnoses predicted this year in the US. There'll be over 50,000 deaths in pancreatic cancer. In Australia, the numbers are smaller, but it's a smaller population, so the actual prevalence is pretty similar. And this is similar around the world. There's slightly higher prevalence in some Asian countries, for instance. The global market currently is estimated somewhere between $2.5 to $3 billion US dollars, and it's projected to grow to around 10 billion over the next decade. So what I want to talk to you today about is our drug namafotinib. Can it improve the response to chemotherapy? So by taking namafotinib on top of standard of care chemotherapy, do we improve the response? I hope to show you the data to date that shows we do. And secondly, what about the newer treatments that are being developed in this space? Can namafotinib be used in combination with those? So first of all, what is namafotinib? Well, it's a small molecule drug, which is just a fancy way of saying it can be taken as a pill. And this is indeed a photograph of our capsules. Namafotinib used to be called AMP945. So it's taken as a pill, so taken by mouth. It's a very conventional inhibitor of FAK in terms of or this class of enzymes. It's highly potent and selective. It's active in models of cancer, and particularly pancreatic cancer. It's taken as a capsule by mouth. It's taken once a day. Very stable molecules, and we can store it on the shelf for months and indeed years. It's got a stable compound, which is great and convenient for patients. And lastly, and importantly, it has properties such that it doesn't actually interfere with the behavior of other medicines. So as pancreatic cancer is often a disease of elderly patients, you will see that elderly patients are often taking other medications for maybe heart disease, maybe diabetes. It could be a range of indications. That our drug doesn't impact those other medicines, and I think that's an important side. Thing to note as well. So namafotinib, as I said, inhibits this protein called FAK. FAK is an enzyme that is overactive in pancreatic cancer. That's been shown by many people. The levels of that enzyme are elevated in pancreatic cancer, and indeed, the higher the level, and particularly the higher level of active FAK, so FAK is an enzyme, the high levels of active enzyme actually correlate with a worse patient outcome. So that's been shown just genetically. Some patients have higher FAK, some have lower, and the patients with the higher FAK, unfortunately, don't do as well. FAK actually is involved in a whole range of aspects in the disease progression. So inhibiting FAK actually has sort of a multifactorial effect on the cancer. I've got this sort of shown here in this cartoon of a pancreatic cancer. The blue is the cancer cells. They're surrounded by immunosuppressive cells, and then that in turn is surrounded by these sort of grey squiggly lines that are to indicate the fibrotic shield that forms around the pancreatic cancer. And one thing that FAK does, it actually leads to the formation of this brittle, quite dense fibrosis, scar tissue, if you like. Sorry, that looks like the font has gone a little bit strange here, but a FAK inhibitor actually helps break down some of that fibrosis and reduces the density of that fibrosis. So indeed, drugs and your immune system can actually penetrate the tumour mass better. By inhibiting FAK, you do improve the immune reactivity to the cancer. So that's known. So they're things that are happening outside the cancer cells. Within the cancer cells, FAK activity is involved in cell survival and resistance to chemotherapy. So by inhibiting FAK, we actually have these anti-proliferative effects, and we actually lead to additivity, or in some cases synergy, with chemotherapy. So a number of different ways the drug works. If it want to be really simple, it's really an effect on the tumour microenvironment, the area around the cancer cells, and effects on the cancer cells themselves. So it's sort of 1-2 punch. So move on to the next slide. And that's sort of the idea here is you can just sort of see. So once you add if you look at the tumour cells here, once you add a FAK inhibitor or dose a patient with an FAK inhibitor, and we've shown this in animal models, you can see you get a lot of the cancer cells die, so they're now grey cells, and you get different kind of immune cells in here that are much more reactive to the tumour itself, and a breakdown of that fibrotic tissue. So you can see there, if I go back and then forward again. So that's kind of a cartoon to try and demonstrate what our FAK inhibitors do. So they're doing that, and then on top of that, you lay over a standard of care chemotherapy that then can come in and actually kill the remaining tumour cells. And we've got extensive data in animal models demonstrating this mechanism of action. So we've been running a clinical trial called the ACCENT trial. That is where we combine narmefotinib with the standard of care gemcitabine and Abraxane that I mentioned a few slides ago. Gemcitabine and Abraxane is widely used in Australia and Korea. And so this study has been run in Australia and Korea. The scheme for the trial, I did want to mention it here. So we have 7 days where patients take the drug. They have a day's holiday, and then on day 1, day 8, and day 15 of a 28-day cycle, they get chemotherapy. And every time they get chemotherapy, in the days before it, they take our drug. So they take our drug for 4 days, day off chemotherapy, day off for 4 days, our drug, day off chemotherapy. There's a bit of a break here, then 4 days, and they take chemotherapy again. So you can see there's this idea of, like, by taking our drug, we're actually priming the tumours, breaking down some of that fibrosis, just like we had on that previous slide, so the chemotherapy can better penetrate into the tumour and kill the cancer cells. So that's the approach. And basically, this study is really about showing that the combination of narmefotinib with the chemotherapy is safe and well tolerated and has efficacy. And so that's what we've set out to do, and we've been reporting data over the last couple of months to that effect. First and most importantly is this figure, progression-free survival. So this is really a measure of how long can you keep patients on the trial so that their disease is not progressing. Once the cancer starts growing beyond 20% over the initial tumour size, the patients are defined as progressive disease and they leave the study. So the longer they stay on trial, the better. Median progression-free survival in our data to date is 7.6 months. So first point to note is this trial is still ongoing, so we're still generating data, and these numbers may indeed change. But 7.6 months, as you will recall, is a couple of months, 2 months better than what you see for gemcitabine Abraxane alone. That's been demonstrated now a number of times, at about 5.5 months for gemcitabine Abraxane alone. So we're seeing a 2-month improvement in progression-free survival compared to the chemotherapy alone. And even if we look at that more aggressive chemotherapy, FOLFIRINOX, we do see an improvement in progression-free survival. So that's really important. So patients appear to be staying on study for longer. We're keeping their disease under control for longer. And I want to just point out, this is a developing sort of curve, but we seem to be getting this sort of plateau here at about the 25-30% mark, which is really quite exciting. And we're watching this data as it continues. So this was a data analysis at the 20th of July. So we do have a few more months on top of that. And as I said, there's still a number of patients on study. If we look at efficacy, we see that we've had a really good response rate. To date, we've had 1 complete response out of 55 patients in total. We've had 16 confirmed partial responses. And notably, one of those partial responses, one of those patients went on to have a pathological complete response, which I can elaborate on a little bit later on if we have time. But basically, 17 complete or partial responses, which is a response rate of 31%. That's confirmed objective response rate. If we talk about all patients who've shown a greater than 30% reduction, so a partial, what's called a partial response, we're looking at a response rate of 40%. So really quite impressive response rate, and compares very favorably to the chemotherapy alone, which generally shows a response rate of about 23%. So we're seeing a substantial improvement upon that. I also want to note this duration on trial. So in our study, when we did the data cut in late July, the median duration on trial was 202 days, whereas the benchmark study that we compare to, the IMPACT trial, had a median survival of 117 days. So there's this evidence of durability of the response, which is really quite exciting. And indeed, we've had a number of patients now who've stayed on for over 1 year, and a couple of patients now have been on study for over 18 months, which is fantastic. At data cutoff, we had 17 patients still on study. 6 of them still hadn't got to 6 months, or we didn't have the data at the 6 months time point yet. So this data is still evolving, and we will be giving updates later this year. Third point I wanted to mention is that if we look at the tolerability of our combination of narmofotinib and chemotherapy versus chemotherapy alone, we really don't see much difference, particularly if we're looking at the sort of more severe adverse events of grade 3 and above. So this is light blue is our drug, dark blue is chemotherapy alone. And what you can see in most cases, the bars here are very similar for things like neutropenia, anemia, diarrhea, peripheral neuropathy, and so on and so forth. We really see very, very similar response between chemotherapy and chemotherapy plus narmofotinib, indicating that the narmofotinib is not making the chemotherapy tolerability any worse, which is what we wanted to see. So if I can summarize that into a really simple image, we've got 3 critical features. We've got the efficacy that I've shown you, we've got durability in terms of response, and we've got tolerability. So these are really three pillars, if you like, that are really important, I think, in a drug that's going to be useful in this patient population. We're moving on now to our new trial called the Amplicity trial. This is a trial that we're running both in Australia and the USA. It's a trial where we're combining narmofotinib, again taken as a pill, on top of a different standard of care. So this time FOLFIRINOX. FOLFIRINOX is probably more widely used in the US than it is in Australia. we feel it's very important to show that our drug can improve the activity of FOLFIRINOX. We've demonstrated that in some animal data. We want to show this now in patients. So this trial is just starting. We've got 2 sites already open in Australia. We're very close to opening the sites in the US. We've got 4 sites identified, just finishing the final paperwork. And there's one additional change to this study compared to the ACCENT trial I spoke about previously. And that is, in this trial, we have both a run-in period with our drug, and then the drug is taken every day through the 14-day cycle. So we're not doing this intermittent where you take the drug some days and not other days. This is just take the drug every day, and then for the first 3 days of this 14-day cycle, you'll be getting your FOLFIRINOX chemotherapy. The reason for this is twofold. One, it's simpler for patients. They just take a drug every day. Secondly, we have seen that the drug is well tolerated by patients. So we feel this is an easier regime, and it's a regime where we don't expect to see any additional tolerability issues. But of course, that's something we need to demonstrate. So we'll be looking at safety, tolerability, and we'll be developing, following the FDA's guidance, the Project Optimus guidance, we'll be developing a recommended phase 2 dose from this study. I wanted to just switch gears slightly in the last couple of minutes, just talk about some corporate matters. So the board is a small board. It's made up of myself, Warwick Tong, and Robert Peach and Jane Bell. So just a couple of points. Warwick is based here in Australia, long career at GSK, was actually CEO of this company from Boston for a number of years. And then an Australian organisation that actually initially discovered nalmefaltinib. Robert Peach is based in the US, long career in biotech and pharma. He was one of the founders of Receptos. And Jane Bell is a corporate lawyer by trade, but had a long career in health and biotechnology, and is in fact is on the board, indeed the chair of Mesoblast, a company some of you will be aware of. So an experienced board. Just looking to the future, nalmefaltinib, as I've shown you, we're getting promising data from clinical studies in combination with chemotherapy in pancreatic cancer. We're looking at down the pipeline, what are the new kind of drugs that are coming down the pipeline for pancreatic cancer? There's KRAS inhibitors, there are antibody drug conjugates. We have data, or there's very clear data in the literature, that by combining a FAK inhibitor with KRAS inhibitors, you can enhance the efficacy of those KRAS inhibitors, block some resistance pathways, and improve the outcomes. And that's in animal models, so we think there's a real opportunity for a combination in pancreatic cancer with the right kind of KRAS inhibitor, and we're looking at that closely. Antibody drug conjugates, a field that many of you will be aware of. Very clear data that by adding a FAK inhibitor prior to dosing with an antibody drug conjugate, by breaking apart that fibrosis, you get better penetration of the antibody into the tumour tissue. And even things like immunotherapy and radiotherapy, we know from literature studies a FAK inhibitor can enhance the activity of these particular treatment modalities. So there's real opportunity across a number of different treatment pathways for nalmefaltinib to enhance the efficacy of those treatments. And thinking not just pancreatic cancer, but indeed other solid tumours that have this fibrotic shell, protective shell around them, nalmefaltinib has potential utility, and we do have some preclinical data in a couple of other indications. Finishing up with our milestones, just in the last slide here. So we're running the ACCENT trial. We reported the top-line data that I've taken you through here. We expect to have mature data in early 2026. That'll be an overall survival data number. So that will be something we'll be speaking to, and in between we'll be updating the market on data from the ACCENT trial. We expect the trial to complete in sort of midway through 2026. And through this period, we'll be planning a registration-enabling phase 2b/3 trial and intend to start that at the end of 2026. Our Amplicity study is the combination with FOLFIRINOX. So that's obviously started now. We've dosed our first patient. We have dose escalation we expect to happen over the next few months. We expect that dose escalation to be complete, and then we'll identify 2 doses that we can then compare in a Project Optimus style head-to-head comparison. So that'll start sort of midway through 2026. So with that, I'm going to finish. Thank you again for your attention, and I'm very happy to pause now and take any questions. So there's a number of questions here, so I'm just going to try and get those together. So there's one question here. What other oncology indications or combination strategy might Amplia target with namafotinib? So this is a great question. We are looking at combinations with some other chemotherapies. So we've got data in preclinical models in ovarian cancer. We think there's a real opportunity in certain types of ovarian cancer where we know that there's a strong FAC involvement and where FAC levels are very high and contributing to resistance to the existing chemotherapy. So that's our work we've been doing with some collaborators at UC San Diego. So that's an area where we're actively examining clinical opportunities. But really, as I said, any solid tumor where we have a fibrotic shield, so things like head and neck cancer, liver cancer, for instance, gastric cancer, all have an opportunity for namafotinib to be involved in the treatment there. I've got another question here. In what way is Amplia's drug pipeline differentiated from other experimental therapies in pancreatic cancer? So our drug, as I've mentioned, is given as a pill, so it's an oral drug. So that differentiates it from a number of treatments, which are given intravenously, so a little more complicated and more expensive for patients in those contexts. So taking the drug orally is one differentiator, in fact. And secondly, the other point is that we're targeting this tumor microenvironment. I think that's really critical, and there's an increasing awareness of the role of that tumor microenvironment in the drug resistance and the challenge that pancreatic cancer presents. So, I think there's a couple of key ways that our drug is differentiated. There's another question here. How does FDA fast track and orphan designation enhance Amplia's competitive positioning? Well, we have a really good interaction with the FDA, and so having that, particularly the fast track designation, allows us to have really good interaction and a rapid turnaround of interaction with the FDA, which is important as we're asking questions and as we're trying to develop our plans as quickly as possible. So that really helps. The orphan drug designation, once the drug would be approved, the orphan drug designation gives us, additional protection, that's an important aspect to the development. So lastly, I know I've got a few more questions, sorry, as I scroll down. So what is the timeline and major milestones for namafotinib clinical trials? Well, as I mentioned, the overall survival in the ACCENT trial will be announced in early 2026. I think that's a major milestone. We will have some additional data coming out over the next few months about our progress, but the overall survival is a number we know a lot of people are waiting to see. Then in the Amplicity trial, it's really showing that our drug can be combined with FOLFIRINOX without additional toxicity, and we'll be generating that data over the next 6 months. There's another question here. What other companies are developing FAK inhibitors? There's only a couple of companies, actually. And I know we're down to the last minute, so I might stop there. But one company is a US company, Veristem, which many of you will be familiar with. And I'm going to stop there. So thank you.